One of the things that the 365 Project likes to do, and really is our mission statement, is to serve as a catalyst that challenges and supports the people of Yellow Springs, Miami Township to engage critically and respectfully in dialogue and action that sustains diverse African American language, culture, and educational equity 365 days a year. So little did I know that one of our student panelists, Bryce White, was asking a question for the school newspaper, The Watchdog. And the question that he was asking was focusing on what is it like being black and young and growing up in Yellow Springs. Separately, the 365 Project also had this same discussion. So when I picked up the Watchdog newspaper, and I was shared with this information by my former teacher, Joyce McCurdy, she said, "John, you need to pick up the Watchdog newspaper. They're having a discussion about young and black in Yellow Springs." And I thought, well, that's just what we talked about at our meeting. So the two thoughts, young and old, actually blended together. And how often do young and old thoughts blend together? So what we would like to do is start with introductions. We'll start here and go down the line.
I'm Bryce White. I'm a junior at Yellow Springs High School. I've been going to Yellow Springs School since I was in second grade. I lived in Beaver Heights before that. My mother is Leslie Sims. Leslie White. My grandfather is Gerald Sims. He's on the council. I play a couple sports, soccer, basketball, track. I haven't really been involved in a whole lot of things surrounding race like this at Yellow Springs High School, so I thought this would be a good opportunity to, voice my opinion on some things I have to say. Plus, I wrote the panel in the paper, so a good chance to, tell people how it is.
Hi, I'm Rochelle Orm, and my mom is Naomi Orm, and she runs the adoption agency on Dayton, Yellow Springs Road. And my dad is Jim Orm, and my brothers and sister is Theron Orm, Hayden Orm, and Ellen Orm. And you guys probably know me from playing golf, and I also play a lot of other sports, but this is an interesting because I'm actually going to HBCU next year, and I just think it'd be a great opportunity. And my little sister is also black, so I'd like her to have just an opportunity herself to express how she feels about being housing in the Springs.
Hi, I'm Andy Petford. My parents are Jody Petford and Chief Petford. I lived in Yellow Springs my entire life. I've worked with Gutch for the past 4 years with 365 Project, Girls Night Out. I've also been a part of SPIDE, which is Students Promoting Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, Education for the past 4 years. So being in groups that spread diversity is kind of my job and my thing. So I'm really excited to be on this panel. I love talking to the community about this stuff, getting the youth involved. So I'm really excited to be here.
Good evening. For those of you who knew me a long time ago, it was Kitty. Moved to Kenna as a professional and then back to Ken because that's what I like. I moved to Yellow Springs in 1968, and I moved from Springfield, Western Hills in Springfield, which for me, in my development was very important. We had a great neighborhood concept, that thing you read about, where it was pretty much all black. In the context in which I came here, I moved to Perrin Woods, which was a school that was newly built in Springfield and was all white. So when I got here, I was angry. We had not been treated very well at Perrin Woods, to say the least. So I think I took it out on Mrs. McCurdy there. I couldn't even talk and look there. Lord have mercy. I'm changed. My parents are Mary and Thomas Durgans, and my siblings, Aaron, Cheryl, and Tommy, who actually went to school in Springfield. I have been my life work basically has been in diversity at a higher education. I'm a psychologist, and I think the experiences I had here actually had a very, very profound impact on why I chose the career I chose. Hopefully we'll talk about that a little bit later. I also participated in sports. I was a three sport as well, football, basketball, track, and again, all those things, we had great coaches and all that. So all that stuff had some very positive effects on my career. I'm going to pass it on.
Good evening, how are you? My name is Teresa Bondron Wagner. I came in 1968 in the second grade coming from Columbus, Ohio. I graduated from Yellow Springs High School in 1980, and I see several of my teachers here as well. Glad to have you here. At Yellow Springs High School, I participated in every sport known to mankind and loved it, but I also had a great opportunity to be in a leadership role. I was class president and in several other organizations at Yellow Springs. The reason that I feel that this discussion is important is not because of me, but because I have 4 children that are going through the Yellow Springs system at various levels. And I think it is such a different dynamic now than it was in the 70s. I grew up in the 70s, and that was in the midst of the Black Power movement. And it was really significant because being here in Yellow Springs, regardless of race, is a unique cosmos, regardless of your race. But coming up in the 70s, I feel that standing in Yellow Springs with so many people that are open-minded, along with the Black Power movement, gave us a whole lot of power and empowerment. And so we grew up with a big change that came about. Before, in the 60s, we just got voting rights. In the 70s and the 80s, we felt that we could do whatever, and we felt like we had whatever power in the school, and consequently, our children, though, don't have the same ethnic background, I'd say, that we did. They don't have the same culture diversity, so to speak, that we do. But in the other sense, they don't really see race as we saw. And I think it's a lot more difficult because the lines are really skewed. You just don't know. A lot of times they don't really know where they fit, and that's even in Yellow Springs. And that's why I think it's important to have this discussion.
Hello, my name is Cameron Henderson. I'm a senior at the high school. I'm student body vice president of the high school as well, and I'm also involved in a lot of diversity groups. My father is Carl Henderson. He's a municipal court judge in Dayton, and my mother, Linda Henderson, works at the prosecutor's desk. My brother is Carl, and my sister is Ryan McGuire. And the reason why I think an event like this is so important is because me coming from Dayton, I came in 5th grade, is because I've had to deal with my individuality and self-identity, interacting with 2 conflicting communities. And I think it's important to give some perspective on that, and for the rest of us to share perspective on that as well. So.
Okay. So I know you all said you grew up in Yellow Springs and whatnot. My name is Hafiz Mensah, and I'm basically from Ghana. I'm an exchange student here in Yellow Springs. I came here last year through a scholarship program, which is called the YES program. We bring people out from Africa to the US to educate them and let them share their diversity and cultures with other families in the US. So presently, I'm living with Rochelle, who is my host sister. So she didn't mention it, she's my sister, right? I recognize her as my sister, So, and I think this program is very important because I've seen a lot of changes occur here and back home, and I think I can highlight on some of the stuff we do back home and here as a source of evidence or income, like educate our younger siblings and we the older parents, we the elders, and so on and so forth. So that's why I chose this program of this kind of discussion.
Hi everyone, I'm Taylor Beck and I'm a senior at Yellow Springs High School. I came here in the 5th grade and my parents are Deirdre Beck and Clark Beck. They were members of Yellow Springs High School at one point. I don't have any siblings and this is actually my first panel discussion on any subject, so I'm also a member of Spidey, and I just felt like this would be a good experience for me, and I feel like I might have some good input. So, yes.
Hello, my name is Edward Johnson. I've lived here all my life. I'm a junior in Yellow Springs High School. My mom is Janice Johnson, and her siblings are Joe, Jeff, James, and Jolanda. I'm part of Spidey, which is a diversity group, and it has influenced me and inspired me a lot. And I think my class and the class above me are pretty vocal about the subject, so I see this as a good opportunity for us to voice our opinions. So I'm excited to be here.
The questions that we reviewed the other day, and I think I'll start with what became known as question number 2, which is probably initially directed at the students, the young students on the panel. How would you rate the curriculum's ability to inform you about Black history and culture and the impact on American history and culture?
As far as Black history goes, it's almost like once you get out of maybe middle school, it kind of deteriorates. In some ways becomes regular American history, but as set in February, we don't really have that much of a Black History Month. We have our nice posters around the school, talking about Rosa Parks, Jesse Owens, Malcolm X, and all those great people. But there's so much more of the Black history. And I think that as a school, we could go so much farther when talking about it, because it is American history. It is something that shaped our country, changed our country, and is still living in our country.
How do you know that? You know, where do you get other information
About Black history?
Yes.
I'm very privileged to have parents that, and grandparents that love history, and also are people of color. So my mom was a history teacher for the majority of her time as a teacher, so at home it was this day, so-and-so did this. Riding in the car with my grandma, who's wife of a woman from England, even gave me Black history. So me personally, have had the privilege to have wonderful parents and grandparents that love history and want to educate me about my people. So I have that at home benefit. But for most kids, it's not the same. So I've been really privileged to have that.
Have you tried to point that out to any of the teachers at the high school that you feel there's a deficiency? Or?
It's always kind of depressing, you know, when all we learn about is like Martin Luther King. And I mean, it's like the same thing every year. So I'm not really learning anything new. And it's like, deep down I know that Black history is so much deeper than that. There's a whole list of people that I hear about when I was little, but we only get to like 5 of them. And it's not even that much. Like, I'm pretty sure one day in history class we talked about Malcolm X for like 20 minutes. So I mean, I didn't really get a whole lot out of that.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, as you mentioned, we actually had a conversation about a week ago, and I thought that conversation was very educational for us to kind of catch up what's really going on, you know, today. And it was, I applaud the students because they're very sharp. They recognize these things. The difference was when I was in school with you, we had a different kind of attitude. And I think one of the nice things about coming to Yellow Springs too was actually the curriculum. I was exposed to a lot of books and things like that when I got to college, actually, you know, we had read when we were 8th grade and things like that. So we were exposed to some very radical ideas, I guess, if you could say at that particular time, in a safe environment. And in our time, we would go to the library. We had a little room in the library back at the table. We read all kinds of stuff we probably weren't, you know, people didn't know we were reading. So when we came out, we were radicalized. And we challenged systems. So, you know, if there was an issue about curriculum or something like that back in the day, we were going to challenge it. We did. the school system, to its credit, was receptive for most of our endeavors. So I thought it was really interesting to see how things had, in some respects, deteriorated with respect to the infusion of culture in the classroom. And as I told the students, in my work, that's a no-no, because you can't live in this world and do anything without being able to work with a global citizenry. And that starts in the classroom, or should be reinforced at least in the classroom.
Teresa, would you care to add to that?
Yes, I'd like to say first, we had an actual Black history course when I was a senior, and Mr. Gudrow, he was a student teacher, so he taught it. Mr. McCurdy provided us with lovely books that were actual textbooks to teach us about our Black history. But I think now that in this new millennium, I think it's a shame that we have to call it Black history, because it should just be history. And the reason that it would raise a question, I think, on both sides of the table is because, this is according to my children, my daughter is right up there, but according to all my children, they're like, well, why would we want to learn Black history? And then their friends will say, well, why do we have to have Black history? And the thing is, they're actually right. Why can't we just have history? And then it wouldn't be a question, because as Ken said, you have to know your past in order to not make the same mistakes, in order to know who you are and how you need to advance in the world. And that is just American history. And so I think that we, as teachers, and I think that some of the teachers do make an effort to do this, to try to teach it inclusively, not as a separate thing, as if we're not, that is still two different histories, because it's just history. And they need to learn to do that. And I think Yellow Springs has always been at the cutting edge of teaching and innovative, and that we should by now know ways of being able to get the point across about all history and how all of us need to progress.
What kind of thoughts do you have about the perception or the receptiveness if you were to kind of like press that issue or raise those kind of questions in your classes to your teachers? Do you feel like deterred from that? Or you feel like, how do you feel that would be received if you were to take that on?
A lot of the times they might say, yes, we can learn more about it, but they have such a set curriculum that they have to get through every year that they just don't hit the certain spots. Like they might just brush over it, and they don't really get into depth about actual Black history. It's just kind of like, this is Rosa Parks, this is Martin Luther King, they did this, but not really like their background or really anything about them. And I feel like we're kind of over asking them year to year. I mean, I know people who have asked, and it's kind of been just like, oh yeah, well, we'll get back to it, because it's just not what we're learning that day. And then we never really go back to it at all. So.
When you're a person of color and you ask a teacher who is not a person of color to teach more about your history, there becomes tension, there becomes awkwardness, because it's a whole other world to them, almost. For you guys, it's also what you guys are living through is what we're learning right now. But it becomes very awkward when you ask, because in the high school we have 2 teachers of color. And also the majority of our classrooms are predominantly white. So when you're teaching Black history, who are you really teaching to? Who are you aiming to? When I get my homework, I do lectures in my history class, but I never get the subject that's about racism or slavery or anything that has to do with color, because how awkward would a colored person talking about their struggles in America? It becomes just a very awkward situation in our history classes when it comes to that, when it comes to asking for a little bit more.
Even if the teachers are supposed to teach about Black history, they're going to ask you what you want to know about Black history. Whereas you don't actually know what you want to know about Black history. Whereas if there were more Black teachers in the school, they would know precisely what you have to know about Black history and what you really know about Black history. So there's this confusion of like, they just rushing through the topic and just telling you, so far as we just rush through, there are more whites in the class, so they don't want to go back to the topic because it's not basically part of the curriculum or something like that. So I think if we had more black teachers who knew like what they had to teach in class and like what they had to ponder in class to teach about black history, that would be better for us.
I believe it was my sophomore year, my junior year, we had this Black History unit taught by Mr. Day, and he taught it very, very good. Gave us so much information. I learned things I never even knew. It was very enriching. I come from Rich Allen downtown campus before I came in the 5th grade, and we read this novel, and I believe, I may be incorrect, but I believe it was called Roar of Thunder, Hear My Cry, or something. And I read that when I was 9 years old, and that was one of the hardest novels I've ever had to read. When I learned Black history, whenever I'm in the process of learning Black history, it's such an emotional ride. I have so much passion going through me. And I don't think it's necessarily the curriculum that's incorrect. It's just the passion. It's just, there's no natural passion. I come from a predominantly black school, so I was surrounded by students who would just naturally have that passion, naturally have that emotional ride. That's just not at Yellow Springs High School. Yeah.
So to what Kim was saying about Black history curriculum that was taught to me in my sophomore year also, it was very good and we got past surface topics and got really deep. But that was one of the only times I can remember actually touching on more Black history besides Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. And those topics are both important, but I think no one really knows what to teach besides those. There's so much Black history, it's hard to what is, I guess, most important to be taught in like the limited time we have. We don't really get it worked into the curriculum, and when it's Black History Month, we don't really take the entire month or even a good portion to talk about anything else. So it's just the fact that there is a lot we need to, I guess, find a balance.
My sophomore year, I did not take U.S. history at our school. I did as a flex credit, and luckily I did it with John Gudgel. And there was time for it. There was enough time for me to learn Black history. I had a U.S. history textbook, I had a Black history textbook, and I had a Yellow Springs history textbook. And there was enough time for it. I had the whole entire year, and I had assignments for my Black history textbook, and there was enough time to hit on it. I mean, it's unacceptable. There is enough time. There is enough time for anyone to say, look at these people who moved the world, who changed everything. There is enough time for you to say that. And the moment where the civil rights movement hit me the most is when my mom showed, sorry, I'm gonna start crying. When my mom showed us those youth, those kids down south getting sprayed with hoses, bitten by dogs, and we were sick. White, black, I don't care who it was in my class, we were ill. But we were all riled up. That was the moment when we saw the realest movements of young people. And now those two moments with John Gudgel and my mom were the moments where I learned most Black history.
I mean, I think living that time, to your point, there was a difference because, you know, maybe we were just too crazy to think about the consequences, but, you know, we were bolder than bold. And I've seen that on a college campus kind of dwindle as well. Because when I went to college, it was the same thing. Went to all white school pretty much. It was Baldwin College. I was in the first real big class of minorities in that school. We had nobody there. We went through the whole thing where we had to organize and we had to, I was joking, I never told my mother this actually, until recently. I didn't know how she would take it. But I was sitting on the, vice president's desk and, a bunch of brothers were basically demanding what was going to happen, very organized and things like that. But, I guess I didn't really think about the consequences, to be honest, at that time, other than we needed something to happen for us to make our situation better. I hope I carried that along, better strategy and things like that as I've grown, but I still had that fire. And, it's interesting to hear, again, how much things have changed in that regard, because this was known for, rock 'em, sock 'em, knock 'em down kind of place to change. We changed things here, and that was the kind of, that was kind of atmosphere, and I still travel with that. And that was what was important to me about being here, because it was a fertile ground for us to develop ourselves. And I think, we challenge folks, but teachers like Mrs. McCurdy and things like that who had a patience with us, and actually not just a patience with us, but they fed us in a way we didn't understand until later on. They put those things there for us to read. And those of us who understood that later on, all I can do is say thank you for all the trouble that I caused in my not understanding. But, those are the kinds of things we would, hopefully you guys will seek your own, knowledge, because it's not going to be there even when you go to college, to be honest. I said I was in psychology. I went through a whole curriculum, doctorate included. They didn't really talk about us. All the stuff I learned was actually in a group called AB Psy, which was dedicated to black psychologists. So, you're going to have to, get into that pattern of learning your own history, and all it does is strengthen you. I don't care what anybody says. Knowing yourself is what it's all about.
All right, one last thing. So, I also feel like Black history in the schools is a hard subject to teach, because who really wants to discuss slavery and stuff like that to children? And it's the same thing every year since we're young. So when you hear the same thing over and over again, you stop paying attention and it becomes repetitive. So in a sense, that's what Black history becomes, is repetitive and boring. But really it's not. So when it gets to that point, who really wants to teach it anyway? So I just feel like we need to switch it up somehow, do something.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, give it to me.
I'm sorry. I was just saying that it's more than that. Slavery is a small, it's a small part of what this is all about, because it goes beyond slavery. You're also talking about the age of Obama. So all these things have happened. So in a sense, it's not negative really. To me, most of what I learned was not negative. Most of what I learned was positive. And so it's not that hard to teach. I teach it, and I'm saying it respectfully. It's not that hard to teach if you do a little research, like every teacher trained to do. They know their subject matter, their perspective to everything. When we look at the world, as you see on CNN all the time, it's a perspective. That's what history is. It's a perspective from different eyes. And so all you try to do is incorporate those different eyes. You don't have to come to conclusions about it necessarily, but incorporate it. This is their viewpoint of it. So, from the standpoint of, from the standpoint of giving, it's not that difficult to do. And it's not just Black history. We talk about everybody's perspective when we talk about education and diversity and things like that. So, one thing you do learn, I'm a history major as undergrad too, is perspective.
This was raised briefly about the impact of having a number of African-American teachers in the school. Perhaps Teresa or Ken, could you maybe touch on that briefly?
Well, when I graduated, there was a Black principal, a Black vice principal. We had numerous Black teachers, but I'm with Ken, one thing, my most powerful teachers, a lot of times were white teachers who cared about me and put a book in my hand and said, read this. The difference is too that, and we discussed it last week, was that how hard is it for these youth to be confronted or to be able to walk up to an all-white teacher and say what they want. It's a different thing. You have African-American teachers, teachers of color, teachers who are attuned to what's going on in our culture, who would encourage us to, as Ken say, speak out and say what it is that you want. But how can we expect these young people to even know what they want? As Bryce said, it gets repetitive. It's repetitive because he doesn't even know what's all out there. So, and I think that it is a responsibility of educators to try, and First of all, I want to say the educators in Yellow Springs are far and above most. I've been to several different school systems, so this is not a put down on the system because we have wonderful, wonderful teachers here. But by the same token, they have to step forward and find new ways. I want to point out, Mrs. Davis up here has written a Black History book. So she lives right here in Yellow Springs. There's a whole lot of people that know a lot about Black history in Yellow Springs. If you feel like there's not enough time, or if educators feel like they don't know what should be learned, there's people to ask. You know, we have to learn to be proactive in it. And I think that the main thing about being in Yellow Springs in the 70s, I mean, really, there was a whole lot going on about Black Power, and it wasn't just the Black students that did the Black Power. Everybody was doing Black Power. It was kind of funny. I mean, you know, we were saying, say it loud, I'm Black and proud, and it wasn't just the Black students saying it. And that's the truth. And so it's a different world out here, so we have to find a different way to enlighten, find a different interest, and find the importance of what you feel is important. Because as Kim says, it's perspective. So you don't have to teach it from just a Black perspective, because there were nuances and big, huge changes that took place in Caucasian society right here in Yellow Springs. It could be taught from that perspective, because they had, you just think about it, back in the 40s and 50s, there was a certain way that things were taught. There were certain ways that were permissive of a way to speak to African Americans. That changed in the 70s and 80s, so that's a perspective to speak from. You know, there's a whole lot more to history than just, like they keep saying, Martin Luther King, a wonderful man. But look what the 70s produced, Obama. That's enough said. That we have a whole lot that we can balance on, that we can start at the bottom of the pyramid and go up and just keep adding on. And you know, the thing is, we always teach kids to ask questions. The adults should ask questions. If you don't know what to teach, ask.
I would just say quickly and I don't know, I mean, I don't know the curriculum here and things like that, but I mean, I just want to take people back. That was part of Yellow Springs to me. That's what made it different. That's what made it special, was because we dared to do things like educate people in a more broad sense, challenge the status quo, if you will. We were always smart. Smart's easy. What we wanted to do when we left out here, we were different. And when I walked this, you know, when I went to college, I was sharper because I came through experience here with people like this. As I said before, they challenged me. This is beyond my parents. My parents set the tone. And I'll say that first and foremost. My parents set the tone. I came from people who were very, very determined about making sure that everybody had rights. That kind of filtered down too. But I think I was fed by the educational system, trust me. And I'd like to get that swagger back if it's not here. You know, if that indeed is not here, that should be here.
So, if the teachers can teach the subject or don't have the means to, I think they should at least inform the kids that there are other ways to learn for themselves. I didn't know about flex credit that Amy was taking until she told me about it. And I didn't know, you know, about certain books, unless teachers would tell me. And we need to take initiative ourselves, of course, but I feel like a lot of kids probably think they know all about Black history because they've been taught the same thing over and over. So it's also up to, you know, the teachers and the adults to let us know there are other ways to learn for ourselves. And that'll give us kind of initiative to do it.
Yellow Springs, and I think, which includes the school system, seems to like to purport that there's little or no racism in Yellow Springs. What is your response to that idea? Do you think that there's racism in Yellow Springs? And if so, what does it look like? How does it manifest itself?
Coming from my point of view, I haven't really seen a whole lot of it in Yellow Springs. And based upon how this town is and how people think in this town, if there is someone that believes in racism or is racist, I don't think they would say anything about it. Because that would just be so weird for this town, which is so big on being open and accepting of other people.
I pretty much have the same outlook as Bryce does. I haven't really honestly experienced any racism inside of Yellow Springs, that's in the school system and outside of the school system. I feel like I'm treated pretty equally, grading-wise and any other ways, so that's a good thing.
There is racism. There's racism everywhere. We are not a closed community. We're not special. We're not any different. We may be open as much as we would like to say, but there's racism. Yeah, it's not, I'm going to pull a dog on you and make sure you get thrown in jail, but it's little things that are racist. There's housing, there's education. I mean, it's just the little things that we're not seeing because we want to be so equal, we want to be so open. That everyone has the same opportunity, that everyone is the same, getting the same education, is going to the same places. We're not any different. We don't have gates outside Yellow Springs. They don't have no racism.
Could you give an example of one of those little things that you mentioned?
Let's just say for teaching, if a white student doesn't turn in something, doesn't do anything, but they're the best thing in the world. But when a person of color does the same thing, it's zero. I don't want to hear you. Let's just not. Thanks for the honesty. And it's like that because they have a reputation that they're so into school, they do all these sports or, in theater, they're in all this stuff, and they don't do their work. I do my work. I work hard. I work so hard. But the bar is set so low for me because maybe it's not just for my color, maybe I have some other issues, but the bar is set low. And if there's a white kid next to me, the bar is set way higher.
We had the McKinney track meet, was last week, and there was this one black kid who was called Dogwood. I don't know where the name came from, but it's due to maybe his generation or maybe his tribe or something like that. And there was this little white kid who just burst into laughter, laughing at the name. He was just telling his friend, look, he's called Dogwood. So I called him to ask him what is funny about his name. And he just said he's called Dogwood. He didn't have any explanation to it or any reason why he's just laughing because he's just ignorant. He didn't know what the meaning of that name or why he was laughing. So I think if we educate our younger siblings about the repercussions and the repercussions and the consequences that happens in times like this, because when he was laughing at the boy who was called Dogwood, he felt so ashamed and so bad, and he reported that white kid to, I think, his coach, who was also black, and the coach called that white kid to tell him he shouldn't do that again. That white kid doing that is in Yellow Springs. He isn't representing himself only. He's representing the community of Yellow Springs, his high school, his parents, and everyone during that track meet who is facilitating that track meet. So I think the more we educate our younger siblings about racism and stuff that go on in Yellow Springs, the better we can just live in harmony. Yeah.
Racism is not the same as it was back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, even the 70s. Racism is overt and you can't always see it. And the kids don't always even know that they were subject to racism. And I think that her point about the classes is one thing that I've noticed with my own kids, especially the same thing that she was saying in terms of the expectations that are given to them, the expectations they have of themselves. And too many times, the children of the black race will just accept it, and they'll just think, well, we're not going to be the class valedictorians. We're not going to be salutatorians. Of course we're not the number one in class, and why not? It has always been that way in Yellow Springs. I thought, that we always have an opportunity, but to hear these young kids talk now, that they don't even have a chance. And the teachers, as parents, you go up and talk to teachers, and they will blankly tell you, no, there's no difference. Your child may have been acting different. Did you ask that? Or maybe I think the term that was in the Dayton Daily News last week is that, you don't treat the kids the same, so the outcome doesn't come to be the same. So you look at it and you punish a black child differently. I mean, how many kids look at the detention rate, or how many especially the young black males that are not represented at Yellow Springs High School as they used to be. You know, what's going on with that? That is something that we need to say out loud. Or, you know, that when kids aren't being accepted or are not after being in the National Honor Society, why not? What is going on that they're not doing this? And that is subtle racism. And you have to, and the kids don't even know it. And the thing is that they will find out when they step foot outside of Yellow Springs. So you're not doing any of the kids favors by not even recognizing what racism is, because they're going to face it. And racism even for the Caucasian kids that leave Yellow Springs and they're so used to being friends and close friends with black and white kids being together, it's different for everybody once you step foot out in Yellow Springs. So that racism in the world does affect us because we're not in a vacuum. So whether it's right here in the gate, which it is, but even when you step foot, you have to leave Yellow Springs, even the shop. It's always going to be affected. You walk around at a store. If I have, in fact, this honestly happened. I had my 2 boys and another friend with them. We were riding in the car, and a police officer couldn't see me, but he could see the 3 teenagers, pulled us over. When he pulled us over and saw that I was a mother in the car, then he changed the story. Thought, I thought there was a crack in your windshield. So you were going to pull me over because of a crack in your windshield. I was right on Dayton Yellow Springs Road. So what I'm saying is that racism is alive and it's well. You have to recognize it, and you have to be given tools for the kids to be able to deal with it, because they have to leave Yellow Springs and they have to deal with it.
One thing that is a concern is that the lack of diversity in schools is a very big concern. I know when I was here, a lot of folks came from different places. There was a big influx of particularly African Americans back at that time. And I come back and I'm hearing it's like 12% in the school system or 12% in the city. That's a question that the city should be, or the village, excuse me, I know somebody will throw something at me for that. The village should, there should be discussion around it. And again, I'm not gonna say, it's not racism or anything like that necessarily, but there needs to be some kind of discussion about making sure there's diversity in this village, because that diversity was very important in the lives of a lot of us. And I think not just the black folks, but I think, to the point that was made before, to everybody. They got a chance to interact with folks who came from different places, and so they were better served for it too when they left here.
There's the interpersonal extreme prejudice that can be expressed, but there's also like the institutional and structural issues. So my question then about, say, the curriculum or the gaps there, if you don't call that racism, what would you call it?
Points, equity, make it so everyone gets what they need personally. Now that can be a blessing and a curse sometimes in school. But when it comes to what you want to do in your life, it's pretty much equality. When we go out into this world, there's people that are going into different things. I'm a senior, and I think in Yellow Springs I have more of a privilege to do leadership roles and diversity roles. And I'm very privileged to have that. But as far as what some kids want to do, they're not going to have the right skills to interact with people. Because, like we said, the majority of our school is white. The majority of teachers are white. So, I do agree that when it comes to teaching our students how to interact, how to even just cope, is not hit on at all.
Has anyone ever told you that you act white or talk white, or that you act maybe a little bit too black?
Yes to both of those questions. I think that happens a lot here in Yellow Springs. To a lot of my peers, I feel that when I talk educated or well-spoken, I get called white, or if I use slang and whatnot, I get called black. I think that's wrong. I think people need to see the difference in that and when Andy was saying there are little things that represent racism, I think that's definitely one of them, one of the ways that it manifests itself in Yellow Springs.
A couple years ago, I went to my dad's church in Cincinnati, and it was one of my first times going there. And the teenagers and children a lot of times said that I acted white, and I knew they were talking about my English, maybe the way I dress, maybe even my hair. And I know that now, if you just proper English, the way you carry yourself is more of a color than an individual person. And I think that it should be changed. And I don't know where I was going with that, sorry. But
So how do you handle that when it happens?
I didn't really know how to react. I didn't really say anything. I didn't know how to react.
Go ahead.
If I were to react now, and not a couple years ago, I would probably tell them that English and the way that you dress, the way that you carry yourself is not the color. It's the way you were raised, and that's how it should be.
What about you, Ed? How do you handle those kind of situations?
I didn't really react either. It was taken aback a little bit the first time because it's not acting white or it's not acting black. I think both of those things don't have to do with the way you dress. It's like you said, it's how you were brought up and how you decide to be yourself. So now I would just say it's wrong. It's not. In many of those things, there's not really a way to act white or a way to act black. It doesn't exist. It's always different.
I get all the time, I've been told, stop acting white, stop speaking white, you're not white, you need to embrace your culture. And being someone of a mixed race, that's a little hard. And for me, when they do say that, I ask them, what does it mean to be white? What does it mean to be black? And then that's when they get flustered, because what does it mean to be white to them? That means you have a proper education. That means you are well off, you have some pretty good money, pretty good education, you look clean. What does it mean to be black? It means that I can't speak correctly, pants are kind of low, it's that sort of stuff. So it fuels the stereotypes. And it's my favorite question to ask them, what does it mean to be white? What does it mean to be black? And it gets a lot of people really flustered, and I don't get some answers, get a, turn around, walk away. But it's one of my favorite things to hear because it's just absolutely hilarious and absolutely ignorant. So kind of fuels me. I love it.
Have you or would you date outside of your quote-unquote race? And how do or would others react to that, do you think?
I'm dating a black guy, and I have no problem with that because I've also dated a white boy also. And, but I kind of know, like if I go out, I have no problem walking around. But I've heard some people say, like, I would never date someone white when they're being black just because they don't want to be judged because there was a white girl or boy. Because, and if you're with a black girl or boy, you're going to be followed around, or if you're just going to be like judged because you're with them. And I just think that a lot of people shouldn't care what race it is. I was in Tobago one time, and this black man was with this white girl, and these little kids came up to me and were like, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. They were black, and they were just like, I just don't like that. Do you like that? I was like, I don't really care. I think it's like fine. But they were just really appalled by it, and I was like, wow, they really don't like that at all.
My grandparents are interracial couple. My parents are some white couple. So when it comes to dating, yes, I've been told maybe you should date your nice old black boy. I've been told that, nice white boy, you get told by that. But I don't think that people understand how important interracial couples can move people. There's still people that don't like it at all. I just watched a documentary called Loving's Story, which is about the Lovings in Virginia who went to the Supreme Court just to get married because they were kicked out of Virginia, just for being married. It's that kind of stuff that moves me. To hear what my grandparents went through, just to love, just to bring wonderful children into this world, it's hard. It's hard to love. I mean, we can just see what getting married right now. It's hard. But when you take that step, when you go outside racial barriers and make people uncomfortable, that's what moves people. So, I mean, if you like who you like. So, but nothing, interracial couples are very important.
Going along with the interracial couple thing, I feel like as a whole, it's beginning to be more accepted, and but to a certain extent, like I feel like it would be cool to see a black man and a white woman walk around together. But then, like sometimes, like on TV, like I'm pretty sure there's a Cheerios commercial where like there's a black man and a white woman, and I mean, there's always somebody that's always like, oh, why would you do that? Like interracial couples on TV, like that's not what America is. Like it's gotta be white people eating Cheerios, like something like that. But it goes the same way for like lesbian, bisexual, gay people. Like there was something in a TV show called like, was it something Charlie or something like that, and there was like a lesbian couple at the end of like the last episode, and like Disney got they got hit for it, like why would you put a lesbian couple on TV? So, I mean, I feel like it's an okay thing until you have mass numbers of people looking at it, where you can like actually get the racist people's opinions and then realize like, oh, this is still a problem.
I just think it's an important question because it deals back with the unconscious racism. Because if you say, I'm not gonna, if you're white and you say, I'm not gonna date someone of color, that's obviously something that says something twice.
White privilege. We kind of touched on that, I think, in some ways, but one of the questions involved in the high school, have you any evidence of any examples of white privilege?
Are you asking white privilege in just high school or just Yellow Springs in general?
However, whatever way you'd like to respond to it.
Well, I guess it goes both for high school and community. There is white privilege. You can see it economically. Who has the money to pay to go to college? Right now, we're kind of experiencing that, seeing who's going where, and there's people that are not going anywhere because they can't afford college. A lot of times in Yellow Springs, especially when I talk to people who are not people of color, when I bring up white privilege, I get the don't throw out the race card. Don't throw out the race card. Because they're not accepting of the privilege. And you know, you're born the way you're born. I was not born white, and I've accepted that. But sometimes you just gotta go with the flow. And if you're gonna put on some blinders and not realize you have no privilege at all, then that shows your ignorance. When, like, even just getting jobs, when even, like, with anything, I mean, there's just people that just are not accepting it. I think that's my issue with this community. Some people just won't accept the fact because I'm throwing out the race card, as I've been told.
Do you perceive the village to be different in terms of racism and race relations? I recall when I was going to school here, particularly like at sporting events out of town, it became, we'll call it challenging at times. But what are your experiences like, in terms of race, who you are, how people respond to you when you travel outside the village?
As much as I am different from other races of people, I feel like it's not very apparent until I get somewhere else. Like when I'm in Yellow Springs, I'm walking downtown, I'm like, oh, it's like me, it's like Bryce, Edward, like Nathan. But then when I'm somewhere else, it's always like, okay, like I'm the black kid, like I'm with the black kids. Like we have to be careful, stuff like that. And my parents just always tell me like, be careful, like because there is racism. Like when you go somewhere else, like it's not the same as in Yellow Springs. Like the police might like profile you because you are African American. So I always, and whenever I go out of town, when I go hang out with people outside of town, I am usually with a large group of African American population. So my role just changes a little bit. It goes from being in a big center group to like, okay, like you're the black kids now.
So you think your awareness about being black kind of changes or heightens once you get out of town?
Definitely.
Anyone else?
At the outset of the conversation, I forgot to tell you who my parents were, Vivian and Leroy Bondurant. And that's important because my dad started the first soccer team here in Yellow Springs, and I see some soccer moms that I'm well aware of here. And we experienced a lot of things in the 70s because soccer was new to America, and they certainly did not expect for a black coach to be there, nor did they expect for black and white players to play together and harmoniously. And they certainly didn't expect people from Yellow Springs, a small town, to be a powerhouse. And we were. But we experienced a whole bunch of racism, a whole lot of it. I mean, people were belligerent against my father, and his assistant coaches had to often be the ones to speak up. The mothers had to often be the protectors of the children, and we were at that time kind of oblivious because when we started we were young, so we really didn't understand that it was racism. We didn't know why they were so mean to us, but as we got older and then into high school, as Bryce said, we'd go to other places and we would actually be called names, and by both black and white. The black kids didn't want anything to do with us because we acted white. And the white kids certainly couldn't understand at all why there was such a mixture. Things didn't change very much. My son.
What do you mean by acting white? We're not going to let it down.
Well, because as the kids say, it hasn't changed that much. We all can speak English, and that's what it really came down to. As soon as you opened your mouth, you spoke differently than a lot of, it wasn't so much the black kids that you were around. They probably heard you speak English. But a lot of white kids didn't expect it of us. They didn't expect our, I call it judgment of our intelligence, to be perfectly honest, because we were good at academics, we were good at sports, and we did it all. But that didn't change because in the years 2010, my son was on the Yellow Springs soccer team, and it was very difficult, as I said several times now. It's a different world because the kids don't have the same understanding. They're all friends. They all grew up from the crib together. So it's hard for them to understand when he went out to Newton, I think it was, and played soccer, and they called him something like a bench monkey or something like that. And he called me on the cell phone because I believe he was one of 2 or 3 African Americans on the soccer team, and he didn't know how to handle it. And I tried to tell him, he didn't know, well, is it on? Do we get mad? Do we fight? What do we do about this? So I had to learn right then, he was my oldest, to try to give the students tools. My dad didn't have a bunch of tools, he just got angry back in the 70s. He just got angry, he yelled out. The whole family's gotten kicked out of games before, And at the time I thought, well, that's cool, but it's no longer cool when a kid is, for the first time, he's 14 years old and someone calls him a name, he's looking like, well, what do we do? Because back in the 70s, we did something about it a lot of times. If someone called us something, we would react in a way that's not acceptable to react these days. So, he didn't have a tool. He had to call me from his cell phone and say, well, Mom, this is what happened. And the thing about it was that the coach who experienced it as a student, he wasn't a black student, so he didn't know what to tell my son. And And of course, all of his teammates were all, I can't believe this is happening, but it didn't help my son out there in Newton by himself. So racism hits us, and I think especially in sports, because as we were talking about Black history, you hear of Jackie Robinson and you hear of Jesse Owens, but sports is such a big thing all around the world, and it doesn't change. Just this year alone, a young man made an outburst when he played football, and it caused a whole lot of racial comments and who he was and how he spoke, and it made judgment on him as a character, not where he went to school or how intelligent he was, but he was just another Black man that spoke out. That's just how they do. And so I think that especially when it comes to sports, we have all of our kids out there, and they represent Yellow Springs, they represent their families especially, so it starts at home that you have to give the kids tools to know when to walk away and when to say something. But you also have to remember that as it's responsibility of the coaches and of the community to embrace these kids and let them know that when they step out into society, that they'll have to act a certain way, and that if they don't, they have to pay the consequences, fair or not fair. And one more thing, even now, as a 10-year-old, I went to a competition this weekend with my 10-year-old son, and you hear the kids. It's so funny because my child is an awfully big 10-year-old, and he's a Black 10-year-old. And when he's in a game to this very day in the year 2014, he gets unfair calls. And a lot of times it's not just because he's big. A lot of times it's honestly because he's Black. He may be the only Black kid there. He's bigger, and he may be, he's actually athletic by genetics. So he gets calls against him, and it's hard to explain it. He doesn't understand why. Well, Mom, they're hitting me in the head constantly. I'm sore. I have a bruise on my back. Why don't they call fouls on them? Why is it that when I walk up to someone and hold my hand up, they call foul on me and I didn't even touch him? So things don't change. It's funny that you think that things get better, but look at it on the TV. If there are Black and white players, oftentimes you will see that it's brought out that these are big Black players, and the Black kids are faster, and that's a stereotype. There's a lot of white kids that are faster or just as apt, so there shouldn't be any difference. They shouldn't be treated any different, but even as small children, they're treated different, and you have to explain it to you. It's horrible to have to explain that to a 10-year-old in the year 2014.
I would like to pick up on that from a historical standpoint. One is, first of all, I say all you young folks, make sure you ask questions to your parents and grandparents, because I'm still learning stuff. I'm gonna laugh at it. I hope I won't get in trouble by this, but I just found out yesterday some stuff about how we got down here. I knew we got down here because we couldn't. I said I was in Springfield. They wouldn't allow us to build. They wouldn't allow Black folks to build in the outskirts of Springfield at that time. It was hard to get bank loans at that time. Actually, when they came down here, I found out yesterday, that on another side of town from where we live, they looked at a house, but the quota for Black folks on that side of the house of Yellow Springs had been filled. So we end up on another side of Yellow Springs, though we end up here. Those kinds of contexts, I think, are very important. When we got down here, there were 30%. I mentioned this earlier, about 30% of the population, maybe a little bit more, were Black. When we rolled out here on the sports team, we were going out to these little heads. Excuse me, I should raise a hand. Like, this is a different generation, I'm sorry. We went to some of the surrounding areas. And, we talk about and joke about it, but our parents were in the stands getting ready to get fights with folks because they called us niggas. But what we did was we whooped that stuff. We kept out of there. But we also had translators. And that's the importance of having a diverse staff, is because, we had a coach, Mr. Coles, who, he took a lot of stuff, for us. When we were going through these things, we had somebody that could translate that kind of experience, and not, it's hard. I imagine, for a white coach to experience racism, particularly back then, it might be hard to be able to tell your kids that was really racism that you went through. So all those kinds of things help build you But asking those questions so you can have that context is actually, you know, to me, it's been fun. I've learned a lot, and I think it also allows me to appreciate this place a little bit more, because even in doing that, again, you know, all the stuff that existed, we still, I thought, we had a community here, and we were able to dialogue in a way that was, you know, probably unique, because it didn't happen in Springfield where I was from. You got trouble, you just be lined up and they brought the wood out, and that was the way it was. I came down here and drove everybody crazy, and they were patient with me. So I appreciate it.
So in terms of sports, sometimes during games against Cincinnati, like folks, they call, because Bryce and I, Joe, and a couple of guys are blacks in the team, they call us names and other stuff. But for me personally, I don't care about what you call me. I don't care about what you think about me or what you say about me. No matter I'm doing, so far as I'm doing what is right and I'm not causing conflict between you and I'm okay with it, because I flew from Ghana here to live with a quiet host family, and everything is going on smoothly and perfectly. I interrelate freely with them. I express my opinions and everything. So I have like a smooth conversation and a happy, what do you call it? I have just a free flow of expression, like within my family and my friends and colleges. Presently, because of like my sportsmanship and the way I treat myself, I'm being recruited by Windberg to play soccer for them. So personally, I don't have a problem with whatever you say about me. The more you talk about me, the more I'm happy because you like me.
Experience, I had the idea that people respond to you differently because you're from Africa and not African American born.
I think they do, but no one has really confronted me with that problem before. So actually, I don't know what to think about me. So maybe unless someone confronts me right now to tell me something different, you know.
Okay. So where did you get this powerful sense of yourself? Where did that come from?
I think from inspirational speakers and my dad, because he also thinks like the way I think. He doesn't care about what you say about him. What motivates me is this quote from Martin Luther King, which says, if you can't fly, run. If you can run, walk. If you can walk, you have to crawl. But whatever you do, just keep moving forward. And I think this is the phrase that keeps motivating me day by day to do what I do most.
Where do you get your sense of, you know, this empowerment from?
Personally, I don't think I always have that sense of empowerment or self, because we don't have the rich curriculum or the African American teachers to really guide us or give us this, you know, this pride in our heritage. And I think that might be the problem with my peers as well. So I think that's more up to us, I guess, and to build off of each other's and our knowledge and our, I guess, ambition to learn more and to empower ourselves and to have that sense of self.
Most of it comes from my parents. They always try to teach me, you know, you are great, you can be great. You're black, it's good to be black. You're a black man. Black men do great things. And then off of that, I can build on it with my own things, like, I can be good at this, right? It doesn't matter that I'm black. It doesn't matter that I'm this or that. So it kind of gives me confidence that I can build upon that. But it's all thanks to my parents.
For me, it's also my parents, especially my mom. She's always, you know, making sure that I'm speaking my mind, doing things like this, knowing where I've come from. Also, it's my grandparents, Joe and Joyce Robinson, who my grandma's changed my life forever. Coming from Liverpool, marrying a person of color and having kids of color, it's not easy. Not easy during the 50s, not easy during the 60s. Her life has been based pretty much around discrimination. Being in Liverpool during the Blitz, and then coming here. It's an emotional ride, and I think that, and also my grandpa, who you don't care what anyone else thinks. You go out on a track. You don't care what people are saying, who's looking at you. You do what you need to do. And it's my grandparents and my parents that have never let me stop. You know, even though the bar has been set so low for me, my parents are the ones who think that I'm the greatest and that I'm the smartest and I'm going to go do things, and I'm going to go to law school, that I'm going to go, you know, break that record for long jump. It's them, you know, to the point where there's no one else. And I'm beyond privileged to have the parents and the grandparents that I do. It's a big honor.
My passion fuels from the struggles to figure out who I am ever since I came to Yellow Springs schools as a black male. Self-identity is such an important thing, especially when you're surrounded by people who just don't understand that struggle coming from a different community. It's very, very tough. But now I can say in the end, going to college, it's time for me to start being proud of being a young black male who has a liberal arts background because of Yellow Springs schools and understanding multiple perspectives, such as living in Dayton and going to school in Yellow Springs. That's so important. And you know, black people are changing. You know, education, because of education. I think recognition of education is such an important thing, and we should be proud of that. We shouldn't look for. We shouldn't look to be complimented. We should just carry ourselves. We should just be proud of being educated black people, and that's what's truly important.
First of all, because they taught me a strong sense of self. And I could absolutely do anything. When I told my mother I wanted to go to medical school, she gave me money and said, well, just go. Doesn't matter whether you've been accepted or you can apply. She believed in me and made me believe in myself. Also, that historically, as well as in my own family, the church has been very important in the lives of African Americans. And they've also empowered me. They always stand behind myself and my children, and have historically, from way back in the 1800s, have been very important to African Americans and given us all a sense of empowerment. And last two, Yellow Springs is a village, and they always say it takes a village to raise a child. I was raised by the village, and the village are raising my children as well.
I would say the same. I mean, I have to definitely start with my parents, and for different reasons. As I said, I was a difficult child, and I know I tested my mother particularly, and she saved my life many times. The old days kind of punishment. And she was just there, and always kind of, I don't know, a different kind of patience, I guess. And she always believed in me. She never felt like she didn't believe in me. So even when I was acting crazy, I know that she always believed in me. She had a patience with me. I also say too, in the old days, we had a great. When I told you I came from Springfield, it was a very important place. I was in Western Hills, and we had just a group, a community that was just so special back then. So many role models, work ethic, and all that kind of stuff. We were closer and closer, closer and close. That old thing you heard in the old days where people, down the street punished you as well as your parents, the whole nine. So it was really, really secure. And when I came here, I think after I made the transition, you sound like we had kind of a similar kind of transition, because it took a minute to get used to. I wasn't used to dealing with white folks like Yellow Springs white folks. Yeah, it was just different. And so, in the nicety, sometimes getting used to people who are nice, a little bit nicer, is sometimes just as hard as getting used to the races that you deal with in some circumstances. But I think the community, and then my brothers like K-Jack, Omani, we had the sports teams here in particular were just a family, and it didn't matter 5, 10 years before you. Once you played here, you were part of a fraternity, and that fraternity and sorority as well. I guess it was both men and women, but particularly guys, and we're closer and close. And so it was a community of Yellow Springs. It was a community of Springfield parents. So there's a commonality, I think, amongst all of us. Even today, so that part sounds great. Sounds like it hasn't changed.
I want to give a shout out to someone who kind of like shaped me and what I'm going to do with my life. And it's actually in this room where I was inspired, where I was brought to watch the inauguration of Barack Obama. And it was Miss Kanine who, we talk about teachers who move you and change you. She's the one. So to talk about me and reflecting on myself and being that person is Miss Kanine. I mean, to be here and just sobbing, watching Barack, be sworn in. It was those things that she took us and made sure she taught us, and that kind of stuff. So I mean, as you talked to Ms. McCurdy in your good times, that's my relationship with Ms. Kanine, and I just want to make sure I point that out because she's changed my life forever. So shout out.
Thanks, Pam. A reminder that our Q&A will be in response to questions that you write down. If you have questions you would like to have asked, raise your hands and we'll give you an index card. And if you do have those now, please pass them down. If we had the superintendent, the school superintendent, and both are principals here, what kinds of thoughts would you like to convey to them?
One thing that I'd like to convey to teachers, principals, and administration at all levels is the recognition of what Black culture is. I think that a lot of times, even in the elementary school, it's forgotten exactly what Black culture is and what Black kids need in Black culture, meaning that there are a lot of African American children here in Yellow Springs that don't have any African American culture. And I think that a lot of times that the administration may not recognize that. They may look at a Black student and say, well, we've chosen Black kids and we are inclusive in Black kids. For instance, if there's a group, when the teachers are trying to represent a whole school and they choose Black kids, they often will not choose a Black child with Black parents. They'll choose a Black child that may have white parents. I think that if it's not said out loud that is a different thing, that the teachers and administrators don't understand that. You have to understand what Black culture actually is. You cannot look at a child's color and say that they represent the Black culture, because if they have never been around Black people and they're Black, how could they possibly represent the Black culture? And how could you expect them to represent the Black kids that are in the school? It's impossible. So I think that they should recognize and understand that above all, that Black is not just a color. Black is a culture. So that when you choose children, when you try to explain to children, or you try to have all the kids represented, you have to remember that you have to have a child that has had the Black experience. And so many of the Yellow Springs, of that few, I think Ken said something like 12%. How many of that 12% actually have Black parents that can really understand what it's like to be Black? And then, so you have to include these children. And I think these children are often overlooked. The actual Black kids are often overlooked. And I think that's one thing that I thought was important.
I kind of hit on this when we talk about Black history, and it doesn't always have to go with exactly with Black culture, but it's also passion. I know Mr. Pryor and I called in the seniors during lunch to talk about the school, and that's one of the things I brought up was passion, and it's people having passion. And that goes for when Black history is brought up, and those people who have a love for teaching, and a love for spreading knowledge. Those are people that move kids that want to finish high school, that give them motivation to go to college and do things, and be productive people in society. When there's teachers that come in and have no passion and say, I just take attendance, and I've been told that, why should I show up either? Why should I listen to you because you have no passion? Why should I have a passion for what you're teaching? So that's one thing to look at. When people love what they do, other people love what they do. So that's just one thing.
Okay, let's move on into the Q&A.
Take a deep breath and take a deep breath in.
For Teresa Wagner, what did you tell your son? How did you react to his situation when he called you? Your son?
I basically told him there's no need to fight because you're there by yourself, but I told him just to remain calm and understand that there's ignorance all around the world. Fortunately, Fortunately, we had conversations previously about racism. I didn't expect it when he called and told me, but I was very upset and, as you say, taken aback because I felt like I let him down by even letting him be there in that situation by himself and that I wasn't there to support him. But I told him just to go be with the coach and not be fearful because it was just talk, and explain to him that, and I really felt this way, that they did that because they were jealous of his athleticism and had no other tools. When I explained to you, you were representing, you were doing well, and they had no other fight against you other than to say that. So just stand up proud and keep doing what you do, and the best way to beat him is to beat him.
How important is it to have more African American faculty in the village schools? And do you think African American students are counseled to take advanced classes, get involved with leadership positions, etc.?
Because I know teachers like Miss Blake, before I even got into high school, she came up to me, and I think Edward too, she just stressed the importance, like, you need to take advanced classes, you need to do this so you can go to college. Like, there's not a lot of kids, not a lot of African Americans, males, or females for that matter of fact, in school, that strive to be valedictorian, do things like that. So, you need to do these things. And I'd like to thank her for that, because it has changed my entire perspective of school going into high school. I wanted to work harder. I wanted to be good at school. I wanted to get good grades because of Ms. Blake. So, it's very important.
Is there a discussion about project-based learning, bridging the gap of Black history? Is that just a flat no across the board?
In the high school at least.
Yeah, no? Okay. Here's a question for Rochelle. Are you ready? She's anxious. How does it feel to be Black in a white family?
I definitely don't get enough African American history, which I guess that's also why I chose a historically Black college, is so that I could get that experience, because most of all of my family, except for my sister, is white. All my grandparents are white. When we go to family reunions, me and my sister are the only two Black people. I have really not had any African American experiences at all. I live in Yellow Springs. There's no cultural African American culture at all. I really have no Black experience, so I guess that would just be a great opportunity for me to get to know my Black side at Sabina State and also play golf.
Would you describe the future your Yellow Springs education has prepared you to attain?
I would describe it as good. I mean, Yellow Springs has always been a very good school, like academic-wise, and I feel like we make that a focal point, but it's not because I'm African American. Like, that doesn't really have anything to do with it. So.
Anyone else? How many of you are seniors? Juniors or seniors? So, you're getting ready to move on, kind of raise on up out of here. What kind of thoughts do you feel about, your preparation for that, both from an educational sense and a personal or social sense, how you prepare to deal with a larger outside world? I know Ken kind of touched on that, there was kind of like a shock almost, leaving here and going out to larger society and dealing with things that are a little bit different. How well prepared do you feel you are to handle yourself as you move on?
Academically, I feel like I'm pretty prepared. I did college prep from freshman year. Socially, I don't know if I'm as prepared. I haven't really been exposed. I've been in Yellow Springs since 5th grade. I need to start going out more outside of the bubble. And so orientation is this summer, and that'll probably be the first experience I get outside of Yellow Springs, and I hope that I can get more exposure to that kind of, to the outside world, outside of Yellow Springs.
Academically, was not the best 4 years of my life. But socially, with all the opportunities I've been given to be a part of this, part of Spidey, working with Gudge, and also with NCCJ in Dayton, has also given me the tools I need. For me, I want to go into political science and law. So to look at how people work. I've been to Anytown, which is a leadership diversity camp, and that opened my eyes. Being from Yellow Springs, I came there and everyone thought that I knew everything, and I didn't. I knew little to nothing. What people were going through, I thought my American dream story with my grandparents was like the best story ever. I know a kid told me about how his mom came over the border and he was in the United States. It's that kind of stuff. So I've reached out as much as I can. I'm not saying that I'm perfect and I've seen everyone and I've done everything socially, but with the opportunities that I've gotten from Yellow Springs has helped me with what I want to do with diversity leadership and that kind of stuff. So I'm very grateful for all the opportunities.
Well, I'm a junior, so I have a couple more years, but I think that being in Yellow Springs, we do get sheltered from the reality. We experienced a little bits of racism, and we don't really get to see what it's like outside. And academic-wise, I think Yellow Springs school system does a good job of preparing us. Maybe not in the aspect of Black history, but otherwise we have a really good curriculum. So I think going outside and leaving, it'll just be a new experience in how I'm treated being Black and the things I see racially, but otherwise I'm pretty prepared.
So academic-wise, I'm pretty stable, but I still need more because education never ends until you're dead. And social-wise, I think I'm pretty stable too because I was from a larger community to Yellow Springs, which is a smaller community, so I know the various diversities between the communities, and I think that is pretty much okay for me to continue on with my journey.
As far as academics, yes, I feel prepared. Socially, I don't know. Struggling to be somebody, to have an identity, and then to go out into the world without that is impossible. Or not impossible, but just, it's hard. I know what I have to do, and that's to be proud of who you are. You can't change who you are. So the best advice is to be the best self, the best person that you are, and carry that out into the world.
Teresa, I know you touched on that a little bit in some of your comments. Anything that you would add?
I think Kim will agree with me that one thing you all can rest assured that you will be prepared when you go to college. You'll be very surprised. The liberal arts education that you get in Yellow Springs is second to none. And one thing that I'm very proud to say of the Yellow Springs school system is they teach you one of the most important things there is to know in education, and that is how to think and how to learn. And if you know how to learn and you know how to think, they can't stop you. So you'll go wherever. There's no school that's so difficult that you can't learn. And that's a very important tool that many of the students that are at the big schools that offer the engineering and offer the things that Yellow Springs cannot offer as a small school, we teach you how to learn, and that's very important. You can carry that with you wherever you go. And the teachers that you run into, the professors that you run into will appreciate the fact that you do know how to learn, you do know how to study, and any shortcomings that you may not have had the honor of having here in Yellow Springs, you'll overcome pretty quickly, because you'll have the tools on saying, well, you know what? I didn't learn this, but I know how to learn that, because there's a book. And one thing that the Yellow Springs teachers put in your hand when you are in kindergarten is a book. And they say you can learn from it, and it really does work.
Do you see any connection between the 3 voter suppression laws proposed in Ohio and Black history? I'm just asking the question.
The connection proves that history repeats itself.
Ouch.
Yeah, big ouch. I mean, I think that's all I have to say is that things that are happening right now are proving that things go around in a circle, and it takes people who want to be that ripple of hope, as Bobby Kennedy would say, to break down those walls of oppression and resistance, to bend history, and to make it not repeat itself. So these examples that we see right now are history repeating itself, and for us to look back, because I love people say history, why we learn it is past in the past, but it's clear as day is that it just repeats, and that we can learn from the great movements, and that we can do something about it.
I mean, it's clear, I think, to most why they are there. The question I think that I would ask people to leave with, particularly students, is when and how do you move to an action phase of your life, so to speak, when questioned with these things. And this kind of goes back to some of the same kind of discussions about what's going on in schools and everything else here, if indeed those are the issues. When do you take up the charge? Because this is going to impact you guys a lot longer than a lot of folks in this room. And I think that was the lessons that we learned, and try to make the world a little bit better, even when you have small numbers. But this is clearly because diversity has arrived, and numbers will speak to diversity, and the only way to actually counter that basically is to have a situation where you reduce those odds. But this is going to be a charge for, I think, the younger folks to kind of ponder, especially as they go through their college careers. Because I can tell you, most campuses, students are asleep. Students are asleep.
In the 60s and 70s, there was a lot of activity, around voting rights, and it just seems to be such a surprise to me that history is kind of repeating itself, and perhaps somebody is asleep, and we wonder what kind of passion is going to be stirred up to address that. I know a friend of mine is calling upon some state senators and other officials to have a kind of a debate about that in a few weeks. As I become more aware of the particulars, I'll find ways of sharing that. Go ahead, Ken.
I mean, I wanted to also, I'm one of those people who like to keep tying things into the discussions that we have. And we talked about that question, you're sort of talking about this question and relating it to why there isn't anything in the curriculum. Maybe that sort of answers those questions. Because if it wasn't in the curriculum, maybe it wouldn't repeat itself because people were already ahead of the game. So to me, I think one of the things I walk away with in Yellow Springs is I question everything from a lot of different perspectives. I don't accept answers without going and do my research. And the people that I travel with, that's the way we did things, and that's the way we do things. So there's a bunch of us that were still fighting on college campuses and things like that. But it's, I mean, these things are just elementary to me. People don't know about stuff because they're not educated about stuff, but then it's also incumbent upon you to find your own answers. And I think that's the thing that's missing for me and a lot of today's discussion is people trying to find their own answers. And then once they find those answers, they clearly need to have some action to take place. And this stuff wouldn't happen because, again, the numbers favor other folks or people of color. But the game doesn't seem to be played like we understand that we actually have that kind of control. And we got to do something about that.
Is it hard to be African American and be on a mainly white sports team?
Well, I think, yeah, it is. Taylor was actually on my golf team, so she was the other
So you got to figure it out too.
girl on the golf team. But it's hard getting off the bus, and you never really play any other golfer who's of color. I mean, I've seen one other boy actually that was of color, and he already graduated. But yeah, it is really hard because Andy's uncle was the coach, and he was a good coach, and he always just told us to do our best. I mean, I don't really have anything to do with being black, but I mean, it's hard. I don't really know.
We're gonna have one more comment.
All right, just really quickly. For a couple of years, we were on the team with an all-boys team, so I don't know if they were intimidated because of our color or because of our gender. But once they saw Rochelle hitting, I don't think it really mattered what they thought because she dominated everyone. So I didn't really see anything. They were all impressed. So.
Your responses have been rich and thoughtful, and I am wiser for having participated. I would like to thank you all so much for the sacrifices you made coming here this evening. Thank you.